This is New Ways of Being, a brand new episode, and welcome everyone. I am so excited to be here today. My guest is Julia Marie, and she just has this incredible spiritual story that we're going to talk about some today, and we'll talk about broader topics around spirituality and awakening, as I always do in my shows. But she, I could probably describe her in many different ways. And I noticed in the bio that I saw that she didn't kind of lock herself into a rigid description of what she does, but I know that she's a psychic, a medium, um, an energy healer, a spiritual teacher, an author. I could probably say um, a channeler as well. And I'm kind of wondering now if there's a difference between psychic and channeler, but at any rate, she does many different things. And so we're going to talk about what she does. Welcome, Julia.
Well, I'm happy to be here, Raymond, and let me make one thing perfectly clear from the top. I never use the word psychic to describe myself. I call myself an intuitive.
Hmm.
And can I define for you the difference? No, but energetically, they're different to me. So I'm an
Oh,
intuitive. Yeah.
okay, got it. Well, so I'm happy that you could be here. And wow, uh, for I'm going to let her tell her story, but I will tell you, my audience, that I just read her fairly new book, Signals from My Soul, um, and I was overwhelmed in reading her book. She has such a long history of awakening and doing so much uh, in the areas that I mentioned, and it's her book is very well written. It's very personal. She tells her story, and I love the way that she did it. She has different chapters that talk about different experiences in her life and how profoundly they affected her. But I'm going to let you, Julia, tell your story to the audience and talk a little bit about, what you're doing these days, and then we'll dive into the conversation.
Well, I'm going to keep it short because I don't want to overburden your audience with too many details. Um, Pre 1989 or thereabouts, I was in the military and pursuing a law degree because I had this overwhelming sense that I needed to speak for people who have no voice. I didn't recognize at the time that was my soul calling to me to wake up, because literally what I do now is I speak for people who have no voice, but I don't need a law degree to do it. So that's example number one for anybody out there. Don't worry if you miss the first wake up call. If you're supposed to wake up, they'll continue to knock on your door until you answer.
Yes.
So don't worry about that. So that was in 1989. I had what are now called a series of spiritually transformative experiences that lasted for about 18 months and included spontaneous activation of healing, as well as what I now know was probably a Kundalini activation. And I had round red circles appear on my body where I later found chakras were. My hands would get hot, and I got a red stripe up my back. I didn't know what was going on. I was afraid. And I started asking questions in my mind to the beings that showed up in my living room and started teaching me things at night. And what I found was that their responses were logically consistent and followed a pattern and were given to me within a framework that I could understand. So
Mhm.
I was raised Catholic. So the frame of reference for me in the very beginning was the Bible. Jesus and the 12 disciples, I was told, is a three-dimensional model for my own awakening, my own enlightenment. So over time, I had various insights around all of that, and it forms the core of my understanding of where we're at in the process as a collective now. And I believe we all have the capability or the potential at this time to achieve what people call Christ consciousness, not only individually, but also collectively. So that's the short version of my story.
Yes. That is the short version. Yes. Having read the book, uh, and I'm just writing a note here that I want to come back to. Yeah.
Okay.
So do you most often refer, and I don't recall this from the book, but do you talk about Christ consciousness primarily, or awakening? What are the words you use to describe, awakening or achieving greater insight and or knowing more about who we are?
My definition of Christ consciousness would be a fully ensouled being, a being that is aware of all of its parts, expressing in a coherent way through the physical vehicle that was created in order for the soul to achieve that. That to me is Christ consciousness.
Okay. Yes. Good response. I don't know if you've read um, A Course of Love.
I don't get to read a lot
Yes,
of
I
other people's stuff.
I think you mentioned.
Sorry. I I've been told that it needs to come direct. So I'm fine with getting things through direct understanding. It's fine. I always know that I'm going to know what I need to know when I need to know it. And
Right.
anything else is I'm I'm left brain heavy anyway. So for me to read a lot of other people's books that I'm going to want to analyze and process that information, I'd rather stay right brain oriented and know that I have access to everything I need in the moment when I'm going to need it. So, no, I haven't read
Ah,
other people's stuff, but happy to discuss whatever the concept is if you want to talk about
yes.
it.
Well, since I brought it up, I'll go ahead and mention that in that book, which was channeled from Jesus, um, he defines Christ consciousness in a very similar way. And it's not the declaration of Christ as a savior as the church thought of it, but defined it very much in the way you do. It's being awakened, in touch with the soul and with the spirit of the universe. Um, so
Well, there you go. Validation.
right, and I have to agree with you. There's so much of spiritual seeking in the world, because I was very deep into it for many many years. Is very left brain. It's very much about learning, and for most people, it's reading a lot of books, or some people get wrapped up in a particular spiritual teacher, I suppose. But it can be many different ways. But now I know that it's so much more important to experience, be in the experience of the awakening process.
Yes.
Yeah,
Well, you can read all the books you want, but knowledge is not wisdom.
right.
Wisdom comes only through experience. And the other thing that every single person that's listening to my voice right now needs to remember is you have everything you need. You brought it with you when you came here and you created an instrument that holds those records. You don't have to look outside of yourself unless you choose to have that experience for your own soul's growth, which is also fine.
Yes. And
Mhm.
that's really that I'm kind of going down a different direction here than I had
That's
planned,
okay.
but um, that's really an issue in the world today. Most people are very disconnected from the the spiritual part of themselves,
Hmm.
and and very. It's not that disconnected. I've had people point out it's probably not the right word because spirit is, like you said, is always there within us, and we have to.
The person isn't aware of it. They're not aware of that part of their being. They are focused on their personality. So that's how I would put it.
Yes, exactly
Yeah.
right. Exactly right. We are, and we're brought up to be very focused on
Hmm.
the external world and the personality, and then we get so focused on the problems of the world, our immediate problems of earning a living or dealing with illness or all of
Hmm.
that. um we it it blocks us from shifting into the state where we really could begin to connect with spirit, which I believe is awareness. And people I think have to learn that awareness is a different state of being or way of being. Do you agree?
I just need to remember if I'm somebody facing a challenge, I just need to remember that I can look at it from the point of view of my personality, or I can look at it from the point of view of my soul. So, what does that mean? Well, I could be asking myself, what's the lesson in here for me? Why did my soul create this? What am I to be experiencing here? And then I'm looking at the experience from a place of awareness and curiosity about what's going on. And I'm not saying we're asking the question, why me? We're saying, what's the lesson I'm here to learn?
Right.
And that changes, oftentimes will change our experience of the situation.
Yeah. Well, I have to relate to myself, that I was raised Catholic and became an atheist and was an atheist for many years and didn't think about, uh, you know, I didn't really, I guess at that point, believe that the soul was real or that there was a God or the universe was more than what I could just see around me and feel in my
Mm-hmm.
body. Until I had a bit of a wake up call and began to shift. And I did read a lot of books and explore answers to that. And as I went along, I slowly began to learn to go more within,
Mm-hmm.
and that's when you do begin to have
Yes.
a
Yeah.
going more within. But I think there are many people who are just like that, who are not connected with the soul, who don't even think in terms of soul. And so asking that question you just raised would not occur to them. Um, but people may begin to get a sense of, well, maybe there's something bigger than myself. What is that?
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and so, and I guess one thing I could say, just from my point of view, is probably everyone comes down a different path of awakening.
God doesn't care, and awakening is unique to everyone. And I say in the book, it can come in the form of a lightning strike, like a sudden big event blows you open, or it can come like the dawning of the sun in the morning. The sky starts to go from dark to light, and all of a sudden you have sunrise. So for me, it was a combination of both. For other people, it's one or the other, or a series of events. It's unique to each person.
Yes.
And the only reason I said the thing about asking, maybe thinking to ask why I'm in the situation, was to plant the seed in the collective out there. You've got people listening that might be spiritually curious, I call it.
Hmm.
Maybe they're not, I mean, you went from atheist to, so there's hope for everybody, right?
Right,
So, so maybe there's spiritually curious people out there that wonder about this kind of stuff. And maybe the next time they get in a difficult situation, they'll take a moment to get quiet, take a breath, and go, well, maybe there is something to whatever they were talking about on that show. Let me try it.
right,
So maybe they'll take a moment to ask the question.
right. Yes, this podcast, New Ways of Being, um, has had a predecessor, and that was my podcast called Our Spiritual Life, which was very general. And I was very much in line with what you were just saying. I had been exploring spirituality myself, and I was offering a lot of information about spirituality for people to help them um, find some answers.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and I explored, the general topic in depth. Now, here I'm digging more into new ways of being,
Mm-hmm.
because I really come to understand that we need to get out of so much thinking and as you said, uh, just pursuing knowledge and technology and explore within.
Yeah, I encourage people to live from the inside out, not the outside in. Yeah.
Yes, I love that term, live from the inside out.
It used to be the tagline on my business cards, live from the inside out.
Yes, I love that. Um, so you're exactly right. And so people will go down a different path. And uh, what the one thing I'll mention at this point and see what you have to say about it is
Mm-hmm.
I from the spiritual teachers I had in the books primarily, um, they all tended to promote the idea that awakening is something that doesn't happen quickly. It can take a long time. It could take a lifetime or multiple lifetimes. And but I've come to realize that's not really right. That we can begin to awaken and ask to awaken and open to awaken and allow the process to happen much sooner. We don't have to make it take years. Do you agree?
Well, I believe that we're living in a special time that allows the awakening process to be supported by universal energies and things like that are happening. And yes, I do believe that if you have the conscious enough to ask for an awakening, you're probably already awake. Okay, so let's just say that.
Okay.
That if you already have the level of awareness to want to be awake, you're no longer asleep. So
Yes.
you're already starting to awaken. You can ask the universe then for more of that. You want to know more about yourself, and the universe is responsive. You'll get opportunities for further awakening and expansion of your awareness. That's just how it works.
Yes.
So yes, would I agree that it doesn't take multiple lifetimes? Well, since I do believe that we live more than one life, perhaps everybody that's on the planet right now has come to a place where they're ready for an awakening. That's why they wanted a ticket on this ride, so they could maybe get that final push that's going to allow them to move to their next level of growth. So there's more than one way to look at that.
Yes, interesting observation. I've believed in reincarnation for a long, long time.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it's made total sense to me in my understanding of the nature of the universe, the nature of reality, and but I've never had a strong urge, or I really say any urge to explore past lives. I've been more concerned about this life and wanting to get to a greater state of
Mm-hmm.
awareness and to experience life in uh, more joyful ways, I guess I'd say. And and I've never explored it. But in your book, you mention that you really did open up to that and had experiences about your past lives. Um, and it seemed that it had a strong influence on you. Talk about past lives a bit and your experience.
Well, first of all, when we speak about past lives and reincarnation, I want to be very clear that it kind of depends on the point of view, whether we're number one, reincarnating, and number two, whether the lifetimes are past. So, from the perspective of me at the personality level, because this aspect of myself is currently living in a dimension where there is linear time. All
Mhm.
right.
Right.
So that means my points of existence, anything prior to this lifetime that I am currently aware of would be called past. Anything after this lifetime would be called future. However, just imagine the line with all of those lifetimes on it, on the timeline, and then imagine a beautiful, magnificent aspect of consciousness that is your soul, that is like a big light, kind of like the one on the cover of the book that makes the rays come down.
Hmm.
Okay.
Right.
And if you'll notice, there's one ray that goes from that light to the person, but there are other rays that don't. So just imagine those other rays are grounding into aspects of soul living those experiences. But from the perspective of the soul, all of this is happening simultaneously. So actually, I could, if I wanted to make clickbait, tell you there's no such thing as past lives or reincarnation.
Okay.
Because from the perspective of the soul, it's happening all at once.
Right.
So the changes that I make in this incarnation impact and affect all of those other ones on the timeline.
That was a
And
good description.
yeah,
Um, people, when they get into a level of learning about spirituality and hear some of this, what you were just talking about with linear time or a time happening all at once, that idea of time happening all at once is so foreign that it's kind of mind-boggling, and certainly hard to understand unless you or hear some explanation like that or have a different way of viewing it. So thank you. That's good to hear.
well, that explanation is the same one I give every time somebody wants a past life reading. I first explain to them, we're going to look at relevant lifetimes to your current incarnation, but from the perspective of your soul, they're all happening at the same time. So you're not really getting a past life reading, but we'll just call it that because that's what the common understanding is.
So, so if I ask the question, you know, should I explore past lives? Is there a reason to do that?
Um, Here's what I know, and I'll default back to what I said earlier. You'll know what you need to know when you need to know it. My first experiences my first experiences with past life memories were spontaneous. The first one I ever remember having, I was 8 or 9 years old, and we were living in Germany, going for a walk in the forest, because on Sunday that's what you did. You went Spaziergang. And I went out in the forest and was with the family, and we stepped over what I later found. It was just rocks in the woods, but they were in a line. And I found out later they were part of an old Roman wall.
Hmm.
Now, when I stepped over the rock, it was like just a sudden shift, and I looked down, and my foot was in a sandal, and I knew I was a Roman soldier. But I
Wow.
just had a flash of it. And I'm 8 years old, 9 years old, and living in a household where if you had experiences like that, you were probably going to get taken to a counselor of some
Hmm.
sort.
Right.
And so I never said anything about it and I never explored it further, but that was my first. And I had other ones like the blue skinned man was a spontaneous that was a spontaneous past life memory. And probably there have been other ones where they've just come out of, I'll get a sudden ache or pain in my body and I ask what this is about, and it's a past life.
Hmm.
So then I acknowledge the past life and the pain goes away.
All right.
So,
Well,
yeah. So
so,
I don't
so
know. I don't think I answered your question, but
well, in a way you did because my my personal perspective in my life right now is that I'm really being open to allowing spirit to guide me.
mhm,
And so I'm really kind of going with the flow of that more.
mhm,
And I know I've had no motivations, I guess would be the word, to explore into that.
sure.
And so I think what you answered was, well, that's fine. If you have, I will know if
Mhm,
that's something to look at.
that's right.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
And it's also interesting, and I'm talking too much about myself, but that kind of relates to something that's happened to me in the last month or so. Up until then, when I'd heard about people, getting into crystals and what's the word they use? Sp Spiritual architecture. I can't think of the word they use.
Sacred geometry.
Sacred geometry.
Yep.
Geometry. There you go. Um, yeah, and tarot cards. I thought, what's the sense of that? But um, all of a sudden, I got motivated to get to explore, give crystals a chance, because, well, a friend of mine said that crystals changed his life, and so I thought, well, I'll give it a try, and and I've got a crystal on here. This is a golden mica crystal, and I felt it very quickly after I
Mhm.
started wearing the pendant. I do folk music performances, and I during my performances I could feel the difference. That there was an energy that I didn't have before, and I won't say that I exactly understand the energy and how that works, but um, so I don't poo-poo that anymore.
They're sentient beings. Crystals have consciousness. They're the oldest consciousness on the planet. They've been there, done that. The stones are the bones of the mother, I say. So if you want to if you want to connect with something that contains the wisdom of everything that's happened on this planet, get your hands on a crystal. I wear a Herkimer diamond, and you can read the last chapter of the book to know why I wear a Herkimer diamond.
Mhm.
Okay, so it's the same thing. Am I obsessed with them? I have a lot of stones all over my house. I don't acquire them just to be getting them. If I'm drawn to them, then I will. Sometimes I use a certain stone for a while and then it needs to go to somewhere else. But that's okay. They don't have legs.
Uh-huh.
So sometimes they need my help to get them where they need to go next because they're on an evolutionary journey too, if you
Yeah.
think about it.
Well, and that's interesting that you say that, because I do at this point believe that everything in the physical universe, and actually everything in the entire universe, spiritual versus a physical, has consciousness, is
Yes.
consciousness, in fact.
Even your car
Even
or your laptop.
Yes. I haven't spent much time thinking about those particular examples, but once you learn that consciousness is the source of life and is the source of everything, then it can change one's perspective.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Yeah, that opens all kinds of possibilities. And
Yes, it does.
what really where I learned that piece of wisdom was from one of Neil Donald Walsh's books, Conversations with God, and he channeled from God that statement that everything is consciousness, and consciousness is in everything, or you could say God is in everything. Um,
Well, God is everything, so there you
yes,
go.
right.
Let's take the in out of it.
Yes, but that's not what
Yeah.
most Christian or many other churches teach. That, and they generally teach that God created everything and we're separate from God
Mm-hmm.
and we have to follow God's rules and all of that. And but what I believe at this point is that no, the universe. Once I understood the concept of wholeness, one night when I was in my exploration phase, that was many years ago, I woke up in the middle of the night and with the message in my mind, learn to experience wholeness and share that experience with others. And it took me a long time to understand what that message was pointing to, because wholeness is something that's quite deep and important and powerful. Um, but when we understand that everything is interconnected and interrelated and arises out of one universal consciousness, if we really dig into that, it can begin to, probably the biggest message I take from that I would pass on to people is that if we look out and see the world around us and understand that the divine, that universal consciousness is in everyone and everything, then it has to change our perspective.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something I think the world needs so much right now. Um, would you agree?
That we need a change in perspective, yes. It's why I started doing a podcast myself, was hopefully to reach people that I never otherwise would. And when I go to my little feed and see the countries that are picking up the words, it's a sobering thought that, okay, maybe I can plant some seeds out there that I otherwise wouldn't have been able to. My opinion, the
Mm-hmm.
Creator created creation in order to learn more about itself.
Mm-hmm.
So there is no separation because we are but a reflection of that which created us.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree totally. But the perspective, if you look at the superficial view of the world, which is mostly driven by pretty negative kind of news about human behavior.
Well, that's by design, Raymond, and we can choose to be in this world yet not of it.
Yes,
I
exactly.
mean, so
Yes, exactly.
that changes the whole ball game.
But yeah, but people do need a way to see that we are not separate, which, because we're physically separate and we're taught all of this view of the world that's based on that separation, that we have to compete for resources. We have to, and our personality what says, oh, you need to be better than everybody else. And you know, it's a very, it's a perspective that's totally based on separation. And out of that comes fear.
Well, but I say
So,
energy goes where attention flows. So I choose intentionally not to even mention that kind of stuff on my podcasts.
okay,
I
good.
don't even mention it
You're
because
exact.
it's not relevant to my experience or my purpose or my reason for being.
You're right. You're exactly right. And we have to have a framework though and a perspective
Sure.
that lets us understand that we are one whole, that we all are interconnected.
That's a big intellectual concept, and it's hard to wrap our mind around that.
Hmm.
So maybe if we could find ways to personalize it more, and I'm just stream of consciousness thinking here, okay? Maybe if we could find ways of personalizing it more and bringing it more now into the immediate moment of time, maybe if we could create experiences where people that are in a group can experience what it's like to be one with the other people in the room. Once you have a felt sense of what that is, then you can understand it. We can sit here and talk till we're both blue in the face about the concept without even really reaching the true essence of what oneness means.
Hmm. So how do we, well, what I know about awakening is that even though we want to, I, I personally want to see
Mm-hmm.
the world awaken, collectively and as a whole, that it has to happen one person at a time. I do believe that as well.
Yes. And it's a matter of frequency, vibration, and sympathetic resonance and entrainment. So the more people that raise their vibration with intent and do their best to maintain that frequency, and as they move in the world, from a person who was raised Catholic, as Jesus did with intent to be at cause as opposed to being affected by the vibrations that they're surrounded by, that's how we're going to change the world. Because Jesus was so aware that he was able to feel it when someone touched the hem of his garment. Didn't even touch him. So he was so connected to his state of awareness that he could discern a slight disturbance in the field. Okay, so he's moving through the world, and I find it very interesting. He had 12 people physically that helped maintain that field for him, but that's a whole other topic for another
Okay.
day.
Okay.
But so there's this unit of consciousness, right, that is made up of individuals and yet functioned as a single unit. At some point in time, they had to have, in order to plant the seed of unified consciousness on the planet, they had to work that way at least once in order for the template to be here.
Hmm.
And so now, as they moved as a group, they affected the people that they came in contact with without the people even understanding what it was that was moving them.
Hmm.
And then people were called to come and listen more and listen more. Why? Because they're now in training to that new vibration. So then they're going away vibrating at a different level. You see? So the model is there for what it is we need to do.
Hmm.
It's just doing the work to get there.
Yes, I agree. So so for people who want to make a difference in the world, what is your answer to them?
I always say you only ever have to ask two questions. Just do your part. And how do you do your part? Ask, what do I need to do next? And when you get clear or you think you're clear about what you need to do next, then you ask, what do you need to know? Like, I mean, as we're sitting here having this conversation, I saw that I need to start doing monthly meditations for groups in a certain way, according to a certain format, to allow them to have that experience. So I'm really good at guided meditations. So I will probably start to do that because that's the idea that's coming to me as we're having this talk about oneness and how people could experience it. So that I feel is what I need to do next. Do you know what I'm saying?
Hmm.
And so I will do that, and then we'll see what happens with that. And if it doesn't have the desired response, then I will go back to spirit and ask, what do I need to know? Because somehow, somewhere in there, I must have not gotten the message correct. So, how to make a difference in the world? Just do your part. That's all. And maybe it's as simple as all of a sudden you feel like you need to go and sit quiet and have a regular meditation practice. Maybe it's that. Or maybe you get the sense of, oh, I need to go about my day smiling at strangers,
Hmm.
whether they smile back at me or not. Maybe I need to put my phone in my pocket or leave it in the car and just be fully present with whoever I'm with. Maybe that's what you're called to do. It doesn't have to be a fancy schmancy,
Right.
give up your job, and
Right.
maybe you get the urge to just be kind. Let that driver in when the freeway's clogged up. Let one of them in.
Yeah. And for me, I got the urge to um, go back to something that of my childhood. I got into folk music
Mm-hmm.
at a young age, 10 years old. And so 2 years ago, I decided, this was after I retired, I decided I needed to start performing folk music, which is
Mm-hmm.
or old songs
Sure.
specifically for seniors because that music means so much to them.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's a part of my life now. I go out and sing folk music for seniors, and they love it. And it really does, as you were saying, it gives me a chance to connect at a whole different level to people that I wouldn't ordinarily be in contact with.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So, yeah,
And
I
that's
can.
making a difference. It's making a difference.
Right. I love it. Well, let's talk a little more about your book. Uh, your book is having read the reader version that I read, early reader version, is something special. Just talking about your own story, but you do have messages for people in that book. Um, Now, one area where you called that out was your principles that you
No,
learned.
they're principles. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Do you
I
want to?
was I was very intentional when I put this book together. I didn't want it to be just a story of and then this happened and then this happened and then this happened. I wanted it to provide the reader with some value and some actual tools they could use if they decide they want to start living from the inside out. If they want to just try and explore this and they're not really called to go find a guru or a teacher because the true teacher lives inside of you anyway.
Mhm.
So that's what I did. And I wrote the stories from the perspective of what I was experiencing at the time. And then I also would speak directly to the reader about the perspective that I've gained over the 3 decades since those events happened. So
Mhm.
I'm kind of explaining here's what I've learned since then and what that the meaning is. And yeah, I put the principles in there because that was the first thing that I was given. And if you'll notice, I said I was very intentional about the book. And do you remember what the first principle is?
Intention, right?
Intent is everything. The intention with which you do something has an impact on its vibration. So if I had written this book because I wanted to be rich or well known, it would have a different vibration than the intent which I had, and that is to give some tools to people that are coming after me, and maybe some hope and maybe some encouragement. to people who might be at the very beginning of their awakening journey and they're fearful about what's happening, well, now you have the internet, and actually, it's probably almost worse because now there's a, like I say in the book, a tsunami of information out there. Now, how do you sort it out? So I wanted to provide people with something that is easy to read, simple to understand, and yet holds your attention. And so hopefully my intention was accomplished. Well, because it was Spirit's intent.
Well, it certainly was for me. It's that I I did start. I read a little bit of the book introduction and some of the early part uh, early, and then I was very busy and had to set it aside. And when I came back to it, I picked it up. And then I read the book to the end nonstop, which I hadn't planned on doing. But yeah, your stories are just absolutely fascinating, and you do communicate a very strong um, presence in the book about life. There's much more to life than we tend to know about, and we can benefit greatly, and the world can benefit greatly when we uh, go do our inner work and
Mm-hmm.
explore that and open up to it and allow spirit to communicate to us. And so, a fantastic book. Yeah, thank you for writing that.
Well, those principles that they gave me came one after the other in a process that I would get a seed thought and then I'd ruminate about it. And basically, what I found out after about the first six of them, well, probably the first four, was that for the most part, these are perennial wisdoms. When I start talking about these, people go, "Oh, that's in this book or that book or that's a." So a lot of what I was given direct is found in some of the great classical writings
Mhm.
all over the planet. Everything is frequency. Truth is, as above, so below. You're a microcosm of the macrocosm. Those things I was told that if I lived according to those principles, I would achieve my own enlightenment and I wouldn't need a physical teacher.
Mhm.
And for the most part, that's been correct. I haven't. I just work with the principles every day.
Yes, but I did notice that you did reach out to other teachers at different times that you got some specific wisdom and skills from.
Yeah, I took training in I mediumship was the first place I had an external physical teacher, only because I was dealing with something that I didn't understand.
Mhm.
Okay. And when the past life stuff happened to me, I went and found past life teachers to teach me how to do regressions because I wanted to know about the process. So, sound healing, I went down that road because I was hearing sound off the physical body through my hands when I first started doing energy work. So, I explored a lot of different things, but the fascinating end result was uh, going down these roads and buying equipment to do stuff with. I ended up, after investing a considerable amount of money and time in the training, going back to how I was doing the work with just my physical instrument anyway. So the lesson was for me, I already have it.
Yeah,
I
now
already have what I need. Yeah.
the and I gather that this may still happen for you. Heat energy will come in your hands.
Yeah, they will turn on. It's not as uncomfortable as it used to be because the frequency of the body has changed, so it handles the energy better. But yeah, they still get physically warm when I get around somebody that needs help.
Hmm.
Yeah.
That's, but that seems like it's fairly uncommon. I haven't heard of many people talking about
No,
experience.
a lot of healers, a lot of people that run energy, their hands get very warm.
No?
Yeah. That's actually more common than not.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, I've never been to a Reiki session. I did receive a oneness blessing back in 2007 when that was a big thing. And I felt very warm energy
Mm-hmm.
entering into my body with that.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Well, um, I want to ask about one more thing. I mentioned this to you before we started. Your poem that you had in the book, Many Names is the name of it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and it's kind of describing what you learned about yourself in a way. And but when I read that, I had such a powerful response in a way that I really didn't quite understand. Would you have any interpretation of that?
Perhaps the word that I hear when you were talking about it earlier, the word I kept hearing was recognition. So perhaps it's recognition on more than one level. Maybe there's an aspect of your being that recognizes who I am as a soul. But I would also say perhaps there's an aspect of your being that recognizes who you are as a soul, that you too have many names, many experiences, many aspects to your own being. That was the point of putting the poem in the book.
Wow. Yes. Very powerful. Well, I recommend the book to anyone listening. I think you can learn something in reading that book, and but it's an enjoyable read as well.
Good.
It's a fun book to read. So thank you. Any final words of wisdom? I see we're running out of time here. So any final words of wisdom to the listeners?
I would say we're all wired the same. I am no more special than anybody listening. We all have the same capacity to connect and to follow and to learn more about ourselves as anybody else, and that you are not alone on this journey. There are beings and other human beings that are more than willing to help you along. So, and don't give up. Don't give up on yourself, and don't give up on the universe, because the universe isn't going to give up on you.
Yes. And I have to ask one more question that
Okay?
brings up. um, so to pay attention to uh, those other resources in the universe, the spirit, angels, guides, and I know you work with guides as well, or I think you call them your team. Um,
The team, they're the healers. Yeah.
what's the best way for people to really open up more to intuition, to hear that guidance?
Give spirit 5 minutes every day. That's what I tell to anybody in my classes. Give spirit. I used to say 15, but people say, "Well, I'm too busy." Okay, give spirit 5 minutes every day. Sit in the same place at the same time with the same intent. Just be consistent and be aware, and sit there quietly. Just focus on your breath going in and out. Don't think about anything except your breathing. Just your breathing, and hold that with the intention of, I want to know more about who I am, and see what happens.
And the one thing I've added to that is someone had recommended me to do journaling, and I've had some regular getting quiet, and I do it in my morning meditative walks, but I started journaling as well, taking 5 minutes or so in that, and or 10 or 15 sometimes. And interesting things come out in that process as if you open and allow it to flow through you.
Sure.
As
And I say to people, always keep a journal and treat whatever your awakening experience is, treat it as an experiment. Be curious about it. Write down your data. Keep track of things as they happen, because someday you might need to write a book too, and it's helpful if you have
yes,
journals with your stories in it. That's all I'm going
yes.
to say.
Very good.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, Julia, it has been wonderful to have you on the show today. I would love to keep this conversation going, but it's time to end. I know you've got other things to do, and so do I. But thank you for being here, for sharing everything you've shared. So much wonderful wisdom. Um, Thank you.
Well, it's been a pleasure to be here. And if anybody wants to know more, they can go to the website and it's juliamarie.us. Or they can maybe give my podcast a listen, and that's Evolving Humans with Julia Marie. I'll be happy to help them.
Well, thank you. And to the listening audience as well today, have a great day and a great life.